Hello, and welcome to the turbulent world with me, James M. Dorsey, as your host. Imagine Gaza if Israel were to agree today to a permanent ceasefire and a complete troop withdrawal from the Strip. One of two things would happen: a Hamas return to power and or continued anarchy in the absence of a credible post-war administration of the territory. Anarchy is already the rule of the land, with crime, violence, robberies, killings, smuggling, and protection rackets on the rise. Even so, in its quest for a permanent ceasefire, virulently opposed by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his far right coalition partners, Hamas may have found, in a twist of irony, an unlikely ally in Israel's military. Not that the armed forces have given up on destroying Hamas. On the contrary, even so, nine serving and former senior commanders say the military favors a ceasefire, even if it allows Hamas to regain control of Gaza temporarily, to free the 120 dead or alive Hamas held hostages, and enable the military to regroup and prepare for a potential full fledged war with Lebanese Shiite militia Hezbollah. Informed sources said the General Staff Forum, which groups several dozen generals, including Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Herzi Halevi, the Army, Air Force, and Navy's commanders, and the head of the military intelligence, discussed the notion of a ceasefire. The discussion followed public statements by the military spokesman, Daniel Hagari, and Mr. Netanyahu's national security advisor, Tzachi Hanegbi, arguing that the prime minister's war goal of destroying Hamas militarily and politically was unachievable. The generals believe a ceasefire and regrouping is necessary, given that the military is fighting in Gaza, its longest war in Israel's history. The Gaza war is in its ninth month. Israeli wars usually last weeks at best. They also feel that a ceasefire could end hostilities across the Lebanese Israeli border with Hezbollah and potentially avert an all out conflagration on Israel's northern frontier. Responding to the commander's position, Mr. Netanyahu thundered, "I'm here to make it unequivocally clear: it won't happen. We will end the war only after we have achieved all of its goals, including the elimination of Hamas and the release of all our hostages." Referring to the Israel Defense Forces by their initials, Mr. Netanyahu insisted, "The IDF has all the means to achieve the goals. We will not succumb to defeatism. We are filled with the spirit of victory." Hamas took 250 Israelis and foreign nationals hostage during its October 7 attack on Israel. More than 100 were freed in a ceasefire and prisoner exchange in November. The Israeli military has been able to rescue only 7 hostages in 9 months of fighting. The commanders are unlikely to get their way as long as Mr. Netanyahu heads a government of ultra-nationalists and ultra-conservatives. Even so, the commanders' willingness to entertain a temporary return of Hamas, despite their agreement that a long term arrangement with the group is impossible, constitutes a Hamas public relations victory. If the commanders got their way, Hamas could declare victory in the war. It would put Mr. Netanyahu in the awkward position of having failed to achieve his war objectives at a terrible cost to Palestinians and Gaza, and potentially herald the collapse of his government. The widening rift between Mr. Netanyahu and the military stems primarily from the Prime Minister's refusal to articulate a clear and realistic plan for post war Gaza. The government has been mulling various proposals for an administration that would exclude President Mahmoud Abbas's West Bank based internationally recognized Palestine Authority and Hamas. Mr. Hanegbi, the National Security Advisor, last week optimistically predicted that a local leadership that is ready to live alongside Israel and not dedicate its existence to trying to kill Israelis would be in place in northern Gaza within days. It will put Hamas under great pressure, Mr. Hanegbi said. There is no indication that Israel is succeeding in creating a Palestinian administration in its image, with the Israeli military fighting in areas it evacuated in the false belief that it had eliminated Hamas's presence. Hamas's whack a mole strategy raises the specter of a forever war. This week, in an indication of the hoops Israel has to jump through because it refuses to allow either the Palestine Authority or Hamas to administer Gaza, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant authorized the restoration of electricity at a Gazan desalination and water plant. Israeli officials said the revived plant would be administered by the authority's Ramallah based Palestine Water Authority, despite Mr. Netanyahu's refusal to engage with Palestinian President Abbas's administration. The officials suggested handing the plant's administration to the authority constituted a softening of Mr. Netanyahu's rejection of any role in post war Gaza for the West Bank entity, even if the Prime Minister continues to insist that Gaza must be administered under Israeli tutelage by Palestinians with no affiliation with the authority or Hamas. Gazan workers have begun repairing the plant's energy infrastructure. The plant services Deir el-Balach in central Gaza and al-Mawasi, an Israeli designated safe zone on the coast for displaced Palestinians that has not shielded it against repeated Israeli attacks. Israeli officials said the repairs and hooking up to Israel's power grid would enable the plant to provide 20,000 cubic meters of water daily. Currently, the facility, powered by generators and solar panels, delivers only 1,500 cubic meters due to the lack of electricity. The revival of the plant may help central Gaza's sewage crisis. Sewage floods what is left of the area's roads, enveloping whole wrecked neighborhoods in its stench in the summer heat. The sewage has entered homes. The stench causes disease for our children and little ones. We cough. Our children complain of itching, bed bugs, and other strange things. We can't sleep at night because of the mosquitoes, said Mohammed Al Bayouk, a resident of Khan Yunis. Marwan Al Homs, a medical doctor, reported the spread of hepatitis, respiratory illnesses, skin diseases such as chickenpox and scabies, and diarrhea as a result of unclean water. Even so, the Israeli move does not, in all likelihood, signal an Israeli intention to fully restore electricity in the Strip or start a broader reconstruction of its energy infrastructure. Israel's coordinator for the government's activities in the territories, Kogat, said the move was a humanitarian gesture. U.S. officials and representatives of international organizations pressured Mr. Gallant during his visit to Washington last week to lift Israeli restrictions on the flow of energy and aid to Gaza. The resupply of the desalination plant was as much an attempt to appease the Biden administration and the Israeli military as it was an effort to shore up Israel's tarnished image. Even so, it sparked controversy in Mr. Netanyahu's cabinet. Mr. Prime Minister, stop this foolishness, tweeted ultra-nationalist Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich. Israel vowed to cut off essential goods and services to Gaza immediately after the October 7 attack. The Israeli military has since reduced the Strip's infrastructure to rubble and allowed only a drip feed of fuel and energy to enter Gaza. Thank you for joining me today. No doubt, you will have noticed that the turbulent world has no sponsors and no advertisers. This guarantees the column and podcast's independence. Instead, the turbulent world depends on the support of its readers and listeners to cover the cost of producing the column and podcast. You can contribute by clicking on Substack on the subscription button at jamesmdorsey.substack.com and choosing one of the subscription options. Thank you. Take care and best wishes.